welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses, and it's a celebration, well, a little personal celebration for the podcast anyway, because let's be honest, there's not been much to celebrate from Aberdeen this season. Thank you very much to all of you who tune in over on YouTube as we finally hit 800 subscribers. Calum, excellent, given the season we've had to hit that milestone.
Absolutely. It's made the season off the pitch a lot more enjoyable than it was on it, and we said it would be nice to hit it by the end of the season. I'm classifying it as the end of the season. It was before the Scottish Cup final. We weren't in it. Who cares? I'm classified as the end of the season. So thank you very, very much. If you do want to see more from us going into next season as well, of course, remember to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening in, follow us wherever, and at RTG_podcast on Twitter too.
Yeah, and our last episode was short and sweet because, let's be honest, it had been a long season, a pretty dreadful game. I know there was the one penalty incident aside. For anyone that realised that we maybe did or didn't record that before the game, who knows? But what we've done for this episode, we are joined by BBC broadcasting legend Richard Gordon for a report card on the season, where we will grade certain segments of the season, A to F, A of course being a good result, F being a bad result. I think you're going to get the idea pretty quickly where this report card goes. But a pleasure to be joined by Richard Gordon to look back on the season 21-22. Well, Richard, welcome back to Red Tinted Glasses. You've gone from working with two legends in Alex Ferguson and Alex McLeish before the weekend, and now two legends in myself and Calum this Monday evening. Thanks very much for taking the time to rejoin us again.
Not at all. Everything was building up to this moment, it has to be said.
Yeah, well, it gets better. And obviously, you've had a very busy weekend, obviously being over in Seville last weekend and then Scottish Cup final. Hopefully you managed to stay hydrated when you were over in Spain as well.
Well, as you know, it's very important to take on as much fluid as you possibly can. And I think I achieved that.
Good. And Calum, I hope you're staying hydrated as well. I know you're a bit full of the cold. So if anyone does wonder why Calum's sounding a bit different today, that is the reason why. But Richard, you're joining us today to look back on Aberdeen's season of 21-22. I'm sure you're delighted to be joining us. And what we're going to be doing is kind of doing our own little kind of school report. So we're calling this the Report with Richard Gordon, where we are grading 4 different segments of the season, A to F. And we're looking at the recruitment, cup competitions, both domestic and European, in the dugout, looking at Stephen Glass and Jim Goodwin's performance, and then the league campaign as a whole. So yes, I'm sure there'll be some high grades achieved.
Yeah, this will be cheery.
Well, we've already lasted longer than our last episode, Calum, so we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a start. It's a good start. We're always looking to improve, aren't we?
Indeed. And as we said, it's a pleasure to be joined by Richard as well. And I think, we'll start off with the recruitment segment. Obviously, it was a season of change that started in the summer, and it was 11 new players that Aberdeen brought in. Christian Ramirez came in from Houston for a reported fee of £205,000 if transfer market is to be believed. Scott Brown came in from Celtic. Declan Gallagher joined on a pre-contract from Motherwell. You had David Bates from Hamburg, another free. J. Emmanuel Thomas joining from Livingston, just making the 6 appearances in this season. I'm only 5 names in, and Richard's already shaking his head, so we can tell this is going to go well. And Bruce Anderson going the other way. So I know if the Top Libby boys are listening, they'll get their moment in the sun on that transfer. We had Marley Watkins coming from Cardiff, a transfer that sparked the detective side of our fan base when someone successfully spotted the plane on his Instagram story and managed to track it to Aberdeen. Gary Woods made his loan deal from Oldham permanent in the summer, and Jack Gurr, the first signing under Stephen Glass as well, coming in from Atlanta B. Just the 8 appearances for Jack before leaving very swiftly in January. And on the loan signings, we had Austin Samuel coming in from Wolves, 7 appearances as he looks to take his Inverness side to the Premiership tonight as we record. Matty Longstaff, remember him? Only 5 appearances. He came in from Newcastle. Both him and Austin left in January. And then Teddy Jenks, maybe probably most successful loanee this season. 2 goals, 2 assists, 24 appearances. Probably fell out of favour under Jim Goodwin, but will probably find himself as a quiz question answer in the seasons to come as being the only player to score in both league victories away from home this season. So congratulations to you, Teddy. That's a nice little award you can have. But Calum, just kind of reeling off those names, it shows how many players we got and probably how unsuccessful the recruitment was.
I was really trying to block some of those players in the transfer business out of my mind. I think Richard's feeling the same. You've just brought it all back. I don't think any other word can really be used other than a disaster, maybe. Is that harsh? I don't know.
Richard's thinking whether to agree or not.
No, I mean, I think it has to rank as the worst litany of bad recruitment in the history of the club. We've signed bad players before. We've signed players who looked like they might be decent. It never quite worked out. I think Christian Ramirez worked for half a season. I think Scott Brown, half a season perhaps worked. I think Marley Watkins, we all know there's something there when he's fit. Getting him fit's the big issue. But it's awful. I mean, it really is. It beggars belief that those in charge of recruitment could have got that so spectacularly wrong, so consistently spectacularly wrong.
And I think the biggest thing is the fact that we went into the last couple of games of the season with only Declan Gallagher and David Bates still in the squad. And I think that just shows how glaringly bad the recruitment was. But, obviously Stephen Glass came in before the summer, so would have been able to kind of maybe identify players that he wanted. But we had no head of recruitment. So it was on kind of, and I think in Dave Cormack's interview with Graham Hunter, it was kind of indicated that Stephen Glass kind of took kind of a bit of ownership on the recruitment. But obviously Steve Gunn, the director of football, being in charge of getting those signings. Richard, do you think we have to kind of admit that we got that summer wrong in terms of having the process in place to get players in? I know we're going to be talking about processes a bit later on as well, but certainly the recruitment process seems to have maybe lacked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely the case these days that it's no longer most clubs, certainly any big club, it's not just down to the manager, is it? I mean, there was a day when that was it. It was just the manager who was in charge of the whole thing. You do need to, I mean, you just would have hoped that quite apart from, even if we didn't have someone officially in charge, that the contacts are there, that you have, and I don't mean just agents, but, people who with connections to the club or connections to the individuals involved who can be relied upon and who can make judgments that can help the club. I mean, we just got it wrong on every single level last summer.
Yeah, it kind of started off on a bad foot and it just materialised from there. But Calum, is there players in there, obviously Christian Ramirez is, banged us in goals at the start of the season. As Richard said, Scott Brown worked to an extent. Declan Gallagher, I feel, was probably the biggest disappointment. Came in with a kind of maybe expectation of being a player that we could rely on. I know he got a bit unlucky with injuries, and I suppose you could also file Marley Watkins under that category as well, being unlucky with injuries. But is it fair to say a lot of these signings haven't maybe lived up to the expectation of the Aberdeen fan base?
Absolutely, and I think you're certainly right to highlight Declan Gallagher in that. You look from where he went, helping Scotland get to the Euros, bossing Alexander Mitrovic in that playoff game, to where we are now, and at times, don't really like to say it, but looking like he wasn't even that bothered at times too. It was really, really frustrating, and I can imagine he's on a very handsome wage, and it's just poor investment. But at the same time, you thought it was going to work. Having looked at him prior, to see how he comes in, and then looking at him now, it's just the contrast is stark, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And on Marley Watkins as well, we all knew that he was going to come in with sort of, is he going to be fit? How long is he going to stay fit for? He might get a run of games and then miss 5 at the same time next time. I think the reliance that was on Marley Watkins as well was also a problem, because with Ramirez, that's sort of the one main striker, the main number 9, and then Watkins is maybe your support act. But then once he's out of the team, once he's injured, which we knew was coming, then what are you left with? And we weren't prepared for it at all.
Yeah, as we saw towards the end of the season when Michael Ruth got his first Aberdeen start away to St Johnstone. But Richard, do you think as well, we're speaking about kind of the Marley Watkins injury, and the summer recruitment wasn't great. Then when we look to January with, okay, we're not exactly doing well in the league, and we've still got the top 6 in our sights in January. We lose Ryan Hedges to Blackburn towards the end. Niall McGinn goes to Dundee, and we only bring in one replacement in terms of an attacking centre in Vicente Bezouen from ADO Den Haag. And then Adam Montgomery comes in on loan from Celtic. Dean Campbell also going to Kilmarnock. I know Dante Polvara came in, but we don't really see him due to his double hernia. Was there kind of that sense in your mind that Stephen Glass was maybe already facing the exit and he didn't get the backing in January compared to a manager that would have maybe been more stable?
I mean, I can see that argument. I would say that they invested heavily in Vicente Bezouen. He did not come cheap. And they see that very much, they hope, I think, as an investment for the future. It was clear at that point that we needed recruitment. We needed quality replacements in various positions, I suppose. The difficulty is January. I mean, it is, you look back through the Januaries, and I mean, off the top of my head, Adam Rooney was certainly a huge success, and he was a January signing, but it's not every year you can pull out someone like that. I think Niall was never going to get game time, and he wanted to be playing. Dean Campbell clearly wasn't getting game time, and he wanted Adam Montgomery. I just don't quite understand. Again, we saw him 3 or 4 times, and Hedges, he had to go. He'd given up, hadn't he? That was clear in his performances and wanted away. And we await to find out what Dante Polvara can bring to the club. So it wasn't the kind of recruitment that we needed then, but I do appreciate the difficulties in doing that.
Yeah, and I suppose, Calum, Dante did put in a decent performance, albeit in that last game of the season against St Mirren, to maybe give some encouraging signs to look for next season. Richard, identifies the difficulties in working in that January transfer window. That would have been the first transfer window that Darren Mowbray was kind of involved in. Obviously, this summer is the big one that we are all looking to see what he can bring as well alongside Jim Goodwin. Is there a pressure on that recruitment team as well as Jim Goodwin to get the recruitment right, given how wrong it went last summer? And, not just last summer, let's remember, we haven't exactly had a good track record of recruitment in recent transfer windows.
Not at all. And also to mention January, I suppose the fact that we brought in 3 strikers on loan last January as well sort of emphasises that point. I think there is massive pressure on Jim Goodwin and Darren Mowbray and Stephen Gunn, I suppose, as well, to get this coming summer correct. Especially, you're given 2, 3, 4 year contracts to players. They have to be the right players for the way Jim Goodwin wants to play. They have to be the right characters. Because we all know that the character of some of the players has been questioned so far this season too. There's massive pressure, and I think, given it was January, it is hard. And then the fact that it's Darren Mowbray's first transfer window as well, where he's actually at the club, maybe there is some sort of leeway given to him then. But now is his time to prove his worth, along with others that are involved. Yeah, and it's certainly going to have a lot of attention on it, given, as we've kind of discussed now, the poor. You just look at that, I think there's Jet, Jack Gurr, Samuels, Longstaff. That's 5 of them all having less than 10 appearances. And as Richard identified, even Adam Montgomery as well, only having a handful of appearances as well. It's not been great. So from A to F, Richard, I think it's maybe quite obvious where this one is going, but how would you grade the recruitment that Aberdeen did this season? So
I'm assuming I'm going back to my old school report cards here, and A is seen as 100% success rate.
Yes,
indeed, yeah.
Right, okay. It's an F.
Yeah. And Calum, I think you're also in agreement.
100%. And you mentioned prior to recording that you sort of spoke with a few people, Glen, to see how they would grade things, just to know if we were maybe going to be a bit too harsh. But the fact Richard Gordon's come on and given it an F, I think that tells you all you need to know. It's got to be an F all round, surely.
Shout out to the State of Scottish Football WhatsApp group chat that also rated Aberdeen's recruitment as an F from the Aberdeen correspondents in that group chat. So I knew straight away that I wasn't going to be harsh with that. So if you agree or disagree, let us know in the comments on the YouTube channel or tweet us at RTG_podcast with your thoughts throughout this episode. We're moving on to the cup competitions. Both domestic and European, so feel free to grade them respectively on domestic and European. Domestically, Aberdeen went out the Premier Sports Cup at the first hurdle. Sorry to give you those flashbacks, Richard, as we rested our half the team as we made the trip to Kirkcaldy, where Calum caught COVID, and Aberdeen decided to go out the cup, dumped out by Wraith Rovers 2-1. Also, the night that Calum decided to tweet that we shouldn't be losing to a team with Christophe Berra. Well, that one went well as well.
Yeah.
Jet robbed of probably goal of the season from that game as well. And then chasing the game at 2-1 down, we brought on both Ryan Hedges, Johnny Hayes and Scott Brown to try and influence the game, and then lost Johnny Hayes and Ryan Hedges to injury. Although I think, if memory serves right, one of them did become fit for the Carabao game, but we all know how that Carabao game developed. The Scottish Cup beat Edinburgh City 3-0 at home, pretty much as expected, although shout out to J. Emmanuel Thomas for the miss of the season in that game. And then, I don't know whether both of you will agree or disagree, I think it was a very meek dismissal of the Scottish Cup, despite taking the lead through Christian Ramirez, which sparked wild scenes in the away end. 2 goals in 10 minutes before half-time. Cheers, Gary Woods. Some good goalkeeping in there. The Dons never recovered in the second half, and we exited the Scottish Cup. Europa League Conference. 2 back-to-back 5-3 aggregate wins over BK Häcken and Breidablik saw us progress to face Azerbaijan outfit Karabag, the first leg taking place over in Baku in some ridiculous heat. Richard, you'll be all too accustomed to the hot weather after your recent trips, but also probably one of the worst pitches Aberdeen played on this season, coming away with a 1-0 defeat and obviously just about a season-ending injury for Andy Constein, raising maybe some optimism that Aberdeen could do the job in the second leg, but we saw all too well the quality that Karabag had when they played on a decent pitch, as they dispatched us 3-1 on the night at Tawdry, 4-1 on aggregate, which drew to a close our European hopes. So, Richard, to you, we'll start domestically. Premier Sports Cup, definitely the biggest disappointment of the season for you?
Yeah, it was the first time I'd got the chance to go along as a fan that afternoon when I crossed to Kirkcaldy to watch it. And actually, there was a fair bit of disquiet in the stand behind that goal when we saw the team. And the mere circumstances that he made so many changes, because although there'd been some decent signs in 1 or 2 of the matches up to that point, I think we all realised that we're not good enough. We're not good enough to make 6 changes for a cup tie like that. That said, first half, they were in no bother at all. Absolutely. It was 1-0, but they were coasting. It was alarming what happened in that second half. But you touched on Declan Gallagher earlier. He was so casual. 2 or 3 occasions, there were big, big disappointments. And the moment that Wraith Rovers got back into it, it was only going to be one team won that. You just couldn't see us coming back into. I mean, that was huge. I mean, almost that wounded me almost as much as the Scottish Cup, the home defeat to Wraith Rovers those years back, which it ranks up there with one of the most disappointing nights. So I just thought it was horrible. And it gave a very early alarm bell, a warning that actually maybe this could be a tough season. So yes. Gosh. And
I suppose, Calum, hindsight is a wonderful thing. You know, we did rest those players with the Europa League conference game in mind. That game didn't go to plan. Neither did the game in Kirkcaldy either. And I suppose for a team like Aberdeen, we really can't almost disrespect the cup competitions. You know, it's our best chance of silverware each season, both the Premier Sports Cup, as it's called just now, and the Scottish Cup. And falling at the first hurdle, especially in that cup, to lower league opposition really is criminal, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And as much as, they would have liked to have rotated and rested, making so many changes ahead of that Wraith game. Clearly a bad idea, definitely in hindsight. But also you could look that maybe if we do take control of the game, get a 2-3 goal lead, which doesn't sound like Aberdeen this season, obviously, but it might have been possible at the time when confidence was maybe a little bit better. Then you could maybe look to rest a couple more players. But for me personally, quite glad I managed to miss the game. Contracting COVID-19 was better than being there, perhaps. But that game was sort of the start of the downward spiral a little bit for us, because we'd all been a little bit cheery, a little bit rosy, enjoying the Europa League, starting off pretty decent in the league, a win against Dundee United at home. And then it just sort of got a little bit worse. And okay, we went on to draw at Tynecastle Pretty immediately after, which in hindsight a very good point, but it was just sort of the start of that downward spiral, and just really, really frustrating, throw away a chance like that and a decent competition. So of course, Wraith lower league, but a decent championship side. And as we found out this season, we're not far off a championship side.
No, and I think we discussed it in the immediate aftermath of the game as well, Calum, earlier in the season on the podcast as well. Something you alluded to there is, why did we rest the players? Why did we not, Richard said we were kind of in cruise control in that first half. Put your strongest team out, and if you find yourselves 2 or 3 not, then you can have the luxury of resting players. Unfortunately, we did the opposite, found ourselves having to chase the game and picked up some injuries. So yeah, the first big disappointment and an alarm bell started ringing for Stephen Glass. And again, as I said, there were certain signs that once those alarm bells started ringing, we never looked like recovering during Stephen Glass's tenure anyway.
Certainly, just a major disappointment, and basically you've nailed it there. We didn't look like recovering, and ultimately we never did.
Well, or you could say Stephen Glass never did. But Richard, on to the Scottish Cup, as we said, probably when you get the home draw against Edinburgh City first up, you really expect Aberdeen to progress, and we did a very professional job on the Citizens. 3-0, as I said, Hedges, Ramirez and Ferguson with the goals. And when the away draw comes and it's Motherwell, my first concern immediately was the fact that we were playing away from home, given how poor our away form was. But when you take the lead, again, like we did in Wraith, we just gave up the ghost and went out in rather tame fashion.
Yeah, it was just a hugely disappointing performance, and it was a mark of so much of what we've seen this season. The inability either to capitalise on taking the lead in a game like that, or just holding on. I mean, back in without digging up old territory, back in Derek McInnes's days, for a long time under Derek McInnes, if we were 1-0 up, you were pretty confident we were going to see that game out. Never really have that, or had that throughout the course of this season. And it's, even talking to Motherwell fans, they know Motherwell are not a good team this season. And look what they've done compared to what we've done. But they certainly, it all turned very quickly. And of course, it was the game that spelled the end for Stephen Glass. Dave Cormack did not look particularly delighted as he sat in the Fir Park stand watching on. So I think the look in his face mirrored how we were all feeling. It's just horrible, because certainly fans of my vintage, we enjoyed so many wonderful days in the Scottish Cup, and it's just that record now stretches on and on and on and on, and it's particularly disappointing to go out under those circumstances. So well, they're not getting a very good report card for me.
No, I think the overall report card is certainly looking pretty grim. But I suppose, Calum, again, we discussed this on the podcast earlier this season, but that was hugely disappointing. And, Joe Lewis had come in for some criticism. He found himself, he was actually ill for that game. And again, you could look back to the recruitment, Gary Woods coming into the sticks and didn't exactly cover himself in glory that game.
Yeah, not a great deputy, one of them. A lot of it does come back to the recruitment side of things. When Christian Ramirez wasn't scoring as well, you would have liked to have had another striker, another option, something different. But that game at Fir Park, it was terrible, and you could sort of sense it as soon as that full-time whistle went. The fact the players had to come up by the away end as well. It was very, very sour. It was very, very toxic. And it wasn't the best journeys home either, but the performance, just throwing it away in such fashion was just horrendous. Once you get that one goal advantage, and yeah, if things hadn't recovered from Wraith, they were never ever going to recover from that. And ultimately, that was the end for Stephen Glass.
And I suppose to kind of reference something that Richard mentioned earlier, as he said, to not to bring up old wounds, but that Wraith game that they knocked us out at Tawdry, that kind of was a similar reaction that's the first time I've seen kind of similar reaction from the Aberdeen fan base at full time to a result. There was obviously quite a angry reception towards Mark McGee after that Wraith game, and then obviously what happened at Fir Park after the defeat in the Scottish Cup, and as Richard said, leaded to Stephen Glass's departure. We'll get the grading for the cup competition, the domestic side, in a minute. But Richard, moving on to Europe, did the wins over BK Häcken and Breidablik almost give some fans, I'll include myself, a bit of a false hope because of especially that first game against BK at home, the way we played?
It was great. No, absolutely. I came up. I remember that evening we were doing the game, and feeling really, really hopeful. It was full of energy. There was a lot of good attacking play. We scored 5 goals. We kind of in between. I think the United game came after the second leg, but certainly there was also something similar in the win against Dundee United in the league as well. So I mean, it didn't last very long, but at that stage, yes. The away leg was poor against Häcken, and we lost that obviously. But there were some good things, I think, from what I recall in the Breidablik games. We got the first indication of how they were going to use the corners and the blocking and the tactics they were using then. So, I mean, those first 2 rounds, absolutely fine. When you think of some of the things that have happened to us in Europe over the years, to come through relatively comfortably over the 2 5-3 aggregate wins. I mean, certainly Karabakh was a totally different matter, and they were way. But yes, I do remember. There was dim and distant days of feeling full of confidence and optimism after that 5-1 win.
And I suppose, Calum, did that kind of confidence from those games give maybe some fans a false hope against Karabakh, and maybe people underestimated the quality that they did possess?
I think so. I don't speak for everyone, but I know from a personal perspective, I definitely got ahead of myself at the start of that season. I got a little bit excited. I uttered the words we're going to win the lot, and I think underestimated Karabakh probably definitely, who, to be fair, over the course of recent years in Europe have done relatively decent, but I just think we were like, oh, this is brilliant. We can actually play football now. It's fantastic. We've just scored plenty of goals in the previous 2 rounds. We'd sort of built ourselves up a little bit, and that was sort of us kind of crashing back down to reality against Karabakh, who ultimately the better side. Obviously, their pitch over there did not help whatsoever. But as you said, when they came over here, they had to do the same journey as well in terms of distance, and they showed us up completely. Yeah, and I think you can really, that Karabakh game, you really can't have too many complaints about the result over the 2 legs. Sorry, I can have a complaint. I didn't get into the game. I forgot about that. Well, that was your own fault, not anybody else's. But Richard, you'll have probably seen Karabakh maybe against Celtic previously as well. Did you kind of have that feeling that it would be certainly a step up in class for Aberdeen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And actually, even in that away leg on that horrible pitch, from what I remember, there were 2 or 3 pretty decent moves that we put together. I do remember them, or they put together. I do remember talking about it in the wake of it, that yes, it would be better for Aberdeen to be at Pittodrie, we thought, but there would clearly be a benefit for them as well. And they had 2 or 3 excellent players.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, it was no real surprise that they were a cut above us, and it actually wasn't. I mean, I remember at the time, it was no great shock that they came to Pittodrie and won. And I think 4-1 over the 2 legs probably was fair enough, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, especially the second leg, we really did struggle to kind of contain them. Obviously, and we did have to start chasing the game as well. But as you said, even over there, we were probably lucky in a sense to come away 1-0. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
I would say so. It's just that we kind of hit that ceiling, and we've actually, when we've had a better team, we're still struggling against that quality of opposition. So with the sides that we had this year, it was always going to be a step too far, I think.
And I suppose, people will look to European competitions coming up next season. And I know we're going to come on to the league a little bit later on, but just the missed opportunity that Aberdeen kind of had this season when you look at Hearts guaranteeing themselves group stage football, and obviously both Motherwell and Dundee United grabbing themselves some European football. Just a huge opportunity that we've missed out on, but maybe as a squad we're still not quite there yet.
And I think that played a big part in the departure of Stephen Glass at that time, because I'm pretty sure that the chairman was looking at that and decided that removing Stephen improved the chances of getting Europe, because he knew the financial value, certainly of getting into the group stages, as we're about to find out with Hearts.
Yeah, indeed. So grading then, Calum will go to you first. Domestic and then your European grade.
Well, domestic, it has to be F again. I mean, really, okay, the performance against Edinburgh City was like decent, but it's exactly what you'd expect. In fact, to be fair, even then, 3-0 maybe isn't even, it doesn't really, it maybe flatters us a little bit. In terms of, and getting knocked out the first hurdle with Wraith, pathetic. Motherwell, pathetic. An F, so much room to improve. In terms of European football, I'm going to be generous, maybe, and I'll give it a C. I think it was decent, and then we came up against the type of opposition that we usually do in that round, and the same thing happened. That always happens, essentially.
And Richard, what's your take? I think you're going to have the same sort of view on domestic anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot hang my hat on a home win over Edinburgh City to in any way save our cup competitions for that. So, I mean, it's an F. It's an F for me in the domestic cup competitions. I'd gone for I thought what we're doing it all together. So I'd gone for an E all told. So that would be a D for you. But I kind of agree. Actually, when I think about it, it was two decent enough wins in the first two rounds. Karabag were always going to be too big. So yeah, I mean, I would go a C as well then for Europe. So F and C.
Well, I was also an F. I was between a C and a D, so I'll just sit on the fence and go like a C minus, and then I'll just sit there.
I think that's fair.
You two can continue the optimism, Calum, as you tend to do on this podcast.
I know.
Then the next segment, we'll see if we can improve slightly on what general consensus of F seems to be. As we move to the dugout, we'll take a look at both Stephen Glass and Jim Goodwin, but we're going to assess the dugout as a whole, because I think it's very harsh to grade Jim Goodwin on his time so far. So we'll grade the dugout as a whole. So Stephen Glass was his first, well, he was hoping it was going to be his first full season in charge of Aberdeen, but he didn't even last a full calendar year. With a win percentage of just 34%, winning 14 of his 41 games in charge. Calum, did the kind of comments from Cormac about him being the outstanding candidate and being the rigorous interview process always cast doubt over Stephen Glass initially?
I certainly don't think it helped in any way, shape or form. I think as soon as he said that, everyone sort of we're immediately doubting it. I don't know if anyone really believed that he was that outstanding candidate, but at the same time, people did still buy into Stephen Glass, and it was probably combined with that early season optimism of smashing these Nordic teams, and then we saw what happened when we came up against a half-decent side. But I don't know. I think anyone who maybe thought it was going well was more in hope rather than actual belief in that it was going to turn out as a good appointment. And it's sad the way it went. She seems a very likeable person. We should maybe stop employing former players as managers now, because it just goes terribly, terribly wrong. It's a shame, but I don't think anyone was having that he was that outstanding candidate, as mentioned by Dave.
And Richard, kind of where do you stand on that? I think we've both made our feelings clear on the podcast about whether or not the process was fully in place or whether it was always set to be Stephen taking charge. But, similar to Calum, do you kind of feel those comments did almost play against Stephen at times when results weren't going in his favour?
Yeah, I don't think for a minute that the vast majority of the support bought into those comments or believed those comments. I think it was always in Dave Cormack's mind because he had identified Stephen and he'd spoken to people around Stephen and people around soccer out there, and he felt that Stephen ticked a lot of the boxes. He might have been better just phrasing it slightly differently in terms of he was interviewed. He did, but whether it was rigorous and whether it was, I'm sure it was thorough. Because they wanted it to work first and foremost. So they needed to know how Stephen was going to approach the job and what kind of football he was going to play. And clearly, as we saw the comments prior to that, that was going to be important, the style of football. But yeah, no, it didn't help. And it was very clear very early on that he was swimming against the tide. And that's the point where, and I've heard it said since, and actually it makes an awful lot of sense that had he had someone alongside him who did have the managerial experience and who had been through that kind of horrible run as a manager, who knew how to cope with it, who knew perhaps different ways of trying to inspire the players to get them going again. Stephen just couldn't turn it around. And actually, in a sense, I was a little bit surprised in the timing of when he did sack Stephen, because having got to that stage of the season, I thought he probably would just keep him throughout. But I do think that back in the kind of late autumn into the late autumn, early part of winter, if he was going to sack him, that's when it should have happened.
Yeah,
because I think it just didn't seem feasible that he was going to recover from that. It was just horrible for him and his family, I'm sure. Horrible for us as fans. And I'm not going to be hypocritical. I was open to it at the time. I thought, well, why not try something completely different? So I can't say, I told you so, but I didn't. I was open, and I was clearly, I wanted it to work.
Yeah.
But I just feel that very, very quickly it became clear. And I think he hung on too long at that point. And then the change was made, and at that stage,
because do you, just from your perspective, Richard, do you think, again, we're speaking hindsight in hypothetical situations, would Stephen have maybe also benefited from being kind of in, you see people in that director of football, and then him speaking to, as you said, maybe a more experienced head coach manager type of thing? Do you think we could have seen success if it had worked in that style?
Yeah. Well, possibly. I just don't know, because I don't know enough about Steve. I know, obviously, we did a bit of digging, and you find out what kind of involvement Stephen has had in coaching, and briefly in management during his time leading up to Pittodrie. But I just don't know. I don't know what Stephen Glass's real attributes are in that sense. So I don't know where his strengths are, what he would actually bring to the table, But I do fully believe that, he knows the game, and at the time, I spoke well enough about it. But I do think that having a wise old head alongside him could have made a big difference. I don't know if it would have turned things around completely.
I suppose it's all ifs and buts now. Calum, I suppose there was signs of some good football being played under Stephen Glass. That's the style he wanted to play. We saw it against Hacken. We saw against Dundee United on the opening day of the season as well in spells. The other game that kind of stands out for me as well was the St Mirren game back in December, when we just really blew them away in that first half. But I suppose the biggest issue for us was defensively. We couldn't keep the ball out of the net. Was it almost a stubbornness from Stephen Glass that he didn't want to change his style to make us that bit more defensively sound?
Possibly. I think a lot was made when he came in about, we're going to play this attacking football, the free flowing, it's going to be pleasant on the eye, and Aberdeen fans are going to enjoy watching their team again. And obviously at times we absolutely did at the start of the season, and we go back to that. Maybe at times there was a bit of stubbornness and try to play that style when maybe it's not 100% suited with the players you have. Having only had one transfer window, to try and change the whole way that the team plays, to try and flip it completely from being that sort of solid, organised, will get the result team under previous management to this now beautiful flowing football side. It's a lot to ask in such a short amount of time when you've still not had like a full turnover of players and you're asking for total different things from the players. I think that's maybe another thing that maybe should have been taken into account, and having recognised that, then he could have had sort of a plan B for when these things aren't happening and when we can then start to grind out results instead of, repeatedly failing when we're trying to play this football. It is very hard. And also, as Richard mentioned, maybe if there was an experienced head, then there might have been someone to talk in his ear and say, look, you've not got the right players yet, let's try something else. And maybe it would have worked out for the better. But as you said, a lot of if, buts and maybes, and it's just unfortunate the way it all worked out, really ugly.
Yeah. And I suppose, if Richard said that, journalists alike would have done their digging, we did our digging when he was appointed, and you could kind of see from his record at Atlanta B, his Atlanta B team wasn't exactly renowned for keeping clean sheets. A lot of the games were high scoring, but Richard, Calum makes quite an intriguing point as well. I'd maybe put the focus on was Stephen Glass, stubborn not to change his style, but did we maybe not have, as Calum says, the players that suited the style of play Stephen wanted to play? And again, is it that just things didn't align?
Well, if that is the case, then it's his fault, and it's the club's fault, because they had last summer from the point where he was appointed to get the players in place. There were moments where, I was kind of watching with my hands over my eyes as they tried to play out across the 6-yard box, and unbelievable some of the risks they took. And you're right that unless you have got players who are central defenders who are very, very comfortable in the ball, and a goalkeeper who's quite happy to be put under that kind of pressure, I just think it's a fatal flaw to continue to try. And I think they did. They kind of stopped after a bit. But there were some games where it was just horrifying to watch. 7 clean sheets all season. I think Jim had a couple in the closing part of the season. That is horrendous. Back in the day, they'd have had 7 clean sheets by the end of September. It's just astonishing. And we didn't score enough goals. So, it's not a great recipe, is it?
No.
And it just got worse and worse as the season progressed.
Yeah, and just looking at the stats we'll come on to for the league, it was only 38 goals scored in the league this season. So, definitely didn't score enough this season. But unfortunately, as we said, Stephen did lose his job after the defeat to Motherwell in the Scottish Cup, and moved quickly, Dave Cormack, to appoint Jim Goodwin. Richard, were you happy with the appointment of Jim?
Yeah, for me, he was an outstanding candidate. Timing is a great thing in football, isn't it? If it had been 2 months earlier, in most people's eyes, he would not have been the outstanding candidate, because at that point, St. were on a long run without a win, but they put together a very fine. I've always been a fan of Jim's. I like his style. I like listening to him. I think he's done it the right way in terms of moving up in his coaching and managerial career. I think, generally speaking, everything I hear, players like working for him. There's been a lot of positivity about Jim. Delighted when he was appointed. I have been, I would say, over the piece disappointed that we haven't seen a better improvement, but I don't think anyone should be judging him right now. He's come in to all sorts of issues. I don't think the club has helped itself. Certainly in terms of the Andrew Considine situation, I think that should have been handled better, and I don't think that helped any some of the departures, I was delighted that they got rid of certain players. I couldn't quite understand what on earth was going on with Christian Ramirez. So, I mean, there's a lot that has been badly handled or mishandled. The form hasn't been as good as I'd have expected. The results haven't been as good as I expected. I think we scored 3 goals in the last half dozen matches. I mean, towards the end of the season, you're looking to try to leave the fans with something. And, we left them with a 0-0 draw against St Mirren. So,
and I think I said the David Bates goal was the only goal in open play that we scored in one of our last 4 games. So obviously Lewis Ferguson was a penalty against Livingston, a penalty against Dundee, and then the Bates against Hibs, and then 0-0, as you say, against St Mirren, and also St Johnstone as well. So pretty grim from terms of open play. But you mentioned the Christian Ramirez situation. We've talked about it on here. Do you think the club should have just kept him for that last couple of games and then let him go? Do you think the way it was dealt with so publicly is, I guess you referenced the Considine thing, is the way the club have dealt with these things so publicly made it difficult for the fans as well?
I mean, I think that he was going home to have a rest. I'm sorry, you've got a week to go. Mm-hmm. And the ridiculous situation where young Michael Ruth has been told he's being released and then gets his first start for the club.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, it left a bit of taste. And I'm sorry, I think Christian Ramirez clearly wasn't happy that Stephen Glass was removed from his post, was he? And he's pretty much offered next to nothing since then. Like, if he's not going to be part of it next season, maybe they were as well just saying, off you go. But if it was me, I would have wanted him to stay and wrung every last ounce out of him before he goes.
Well, I think, as you said, with obviously Marley Watkins, kind of not being fit enough, and we then put, as you said, poor Michael Ruth in that awkward situation where he said, well, you're leaving the club, and then you offered him next to no service in his first start for the club. Really felt for him. But Calum, I suppose, as Richard says, it is kind of difficult to judge Jim Goodwin so far. It's not his squad, but it's quite refreshing to hear from someone obviously as respected as Richard, who's worked in the media, has heard and maybe dealt with Jim on certainly a more regular basis than we'll have ever had dealings with. So encouraging that, certainly maybe the players that Richard's had dealing with who have then worked under Jim have that level of respect. It's obviously quite clear that maybe certain players in this Aberdeen squad don't have that level of respect for Jim Goodwin. So maybe signs of encouragement, as you kind of alluded to in terms of transfer, getting players in that will respect Jim Goodwin and players that Jim Goodwin wants. We can't really judge him on what we've seen so far, which is, of course, just 2 wins from 12, 5 draws and 5 defeats.
Yeah, basically you can't judge Jim Goodwin right now. I think we all would have loved for him to come in the door, immediately fix things and get us into that top 6 qualify for Europe. Realistically, with the way Aberdeen have been this season, the whole club has been an utter car crash with the way the leaks have been coming out, players being told they're leaving like a month before the end of the season, then Ramirez going away. I think there's a lot more for Jim Goodwin to fix than would have been just him coming in the door and having a new manager bounce. It is encouraging to hear that players do enjoy working for him and things like that. I think this summer will be a massive one for Aberdeen in general. Jim Goodwin, if it goes right and if it goes the way he wants it to go, I'm sure we'll be in a far better place in 12 months. And he said, don't judge me now, judge me in 12 months. He's not had his squad. The whole thing's been a problem with, as I mentioned, the leaks. And I think there's bigger problems than Andy Considine's agent right now at the club. It will be a very, very interesting one. But I do have faith in him that he could turn us around. I don't know if it will just be one transfer window to fix it. I have a feeling he might need a little bit more time than that. And well, here's hoping he gets it. But if there is signs of improvement, then I'm sure he will be afforded that time as long as we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I suppose just finally, to make the point that you said is you hope he is afforded that time to kind of get things right. Richard, I've kind of been kind of vocal in the fact that there is almost a pressure on Jim Goodwin to get it right this summer, not just in terms of transfer targets, but then to hit the ground running in the Premier Sports Cup and also the league. Because if we start poorly and, God forbid, exit the group stages in the Premier Sports Cup and start the league run poorly, how quickly could Jim find himself under some serious pressure?
Well, look, fairly quickly, I guess. The one thing I would say is that I would be astonished if he is not given as much financial support this summer as he wants, essentially. Because you can be guaranteed that Dave Cormack does not want this to go badly wrong. He needs this to be successful. So I would think that, I'm not saying it'll be an open checkbook and he'll get absolutely everything he wants, but they will give him feasibly as much support as they possibly can. And if they get, I know they've got, I don't know names, but I've been told that if they get the targets that they've got lined up, there are players there that will excite the fans, and that will certainly improve the quality of the squad. But Calum's right. I mean, it's a huge summer. And I'm really interested. I don't know how long it'll be before we start to hear some names and deals are being announced, but can't wait to hear the first few names, because I think that might just give us a little indication as to where they're pitching it. And from what I'm told, I don't know, but from what I'm told, that Darren Mowbray, certainly the net has been cast far and wide, and I think the club is happy with the suggestions that he's coming up with. But it's got to be Jim Goodwin. Jim Goodwin has to make that final decision.
Certainly.
Because it's his team. He'll want them to play a certain way. And he did. His track record is pretty decent. Now, I know he was operating at a different level in terms of the transfer market, but he's brought in a lot of players who have really benefited St Mirren in particular during that time. Yeah. If there's any slight concern, the one area that he hasn't found an answer is in the striking department, because he hasn't brought in a striker who's scored goals regularly. So obviously, Graded from midfield.
Yeah, I suppose Eamon Brophy was a bit of a disappointment for St Mirren.
Yeah, 7 or 8 goals.
Yeah, I actually thought you were going to say defensively, considering how easy it would be to fix, and we continue to leak goals. But I suppose you could class it under the fact that it's not his defence, and we'll see how that works this summer. But yeah, certainly one to kind of certainly keep an eye on and intrigue, as you said, the names that have been casted. You are right. Some of the recruitment he did, especially with St Mirren, was admirable. Even this season, you just need to look at, as I think we compared on the podcast, the 2 loanees both clubs got from Wolves. We got Austin Samuels and St Mirren got Connor Ronan. So you know which team got the better of the 2 players. So if we're looking to grade the dugout, as I said, it's going to be collectively, because I think it's harsh to just grade Jim on his own. Richard, where would you grade the dugout performance?
I'll give it an E, and that's only because we avoided getting dragged into the relegation playoff. I just couldn't, in a season where teams who were not playing well and had other than qualifying for Europe, had disappointing campaigns in the sense, I think Dundee United have done well. That's not fair. Dundee United have done well, Hearts clearly, but to Motherwell, it's by no means been a vintage season for Motherwell, and to finish up behind some of the teams that we finished up behind and compare their budgets to what we are working on. I think E is probably generous.
Calum, are you going to be as generous?
I don't know. I'm not sure, because E is generous. It is generous. But in terms, mentioning there all some of the, we're going to use the word dross that's been in this league, and I include ourselves in that. The fact we are not somehow in somewhat sort of a relegation battle still. I was watching the game against St Johnstone against Inverness, and I was thinking, it's a miracle we're not in this game right now. So I suppose some credit has to be going for that, but at the same time, that wasn't the aim throughout the whole season. We finished 10th. It's got to be an F. Come on. It was terrible. There was a few good moments, that week where we beat Hibs, beat Hearts. And
how fondly we look back on that week.
Exactly. I mean, that week was good. But other than that, it's been terrible. And we finished 10th. It's an F for me.
I see. I'm kind of alongside Richard. I've gone with an E as well, just because I think the fact we're including Jim Goodwin in this bumps it up
maybe
to an E. I kind of agree slightly with Richard in terms of the timing around Stephen's departure. It wasn't done. Maybe I think there was a lot of people believed after that defeat at Dens, when he looked kind of a resigned figure, that it was maybe not done then. And yeah, I think as well, Jim coming in when he did, not having the transfer window to bring in his own players and having to deal with what he did. And I know top six was still on the cards on the last day before the split, and well, we ended up staying up instead. So yeah, for me, it's an E, but certainly not a pretty E. But yeah. I think the consensus is so far that there's certainly a lot of room for improvement next season. And we'll finish it up with just the league form, and then just touching on our ambitions for next season. I think it's pretty obvious where the league grade is going to go, but our home form saw us rank 5th in the table, playing 17 at home, winning 7, drawing 4, losing 5, gaining 25 points at Tawdry, scoring 23 goals, conceding 17. Away from home was where the problem lied, though. 2 wins in the 17 games, 5 draws, 10 defeats, just 11 points on the road. Only Dundee could do worse on the road than Aberdeen this season, picking up 10 points. Scoring 15 goals and conceding 25. It was pretty grim reading on the road, so fair play to anyone who attended all 17 matches, certainly in the league anyway. Although, Calum, I suppose you kind of alluded it to, we did make a good start, not just in Europe, but we were unbeaten in our first 4 in the league, and things, might not have been certainly rosy, but showed signs of what could be. But we then followed that up with 5 straight defeats. And again, as we were speaking about alarm bells and not recovering, Aberdeen's league season never really recovered from those 5 defeats.
No, I could just leave it there if you want. It was an awful league campaign. I just referenced it. We had a week where things were great, essentially, and we did start the season pretty well. When we got that late winner against Livingston, obviously, it was very much a helping hand from Max Strycek. I thought maybe we do have that little bit of grit or something that we can grind out those results. That was soon revealed that was not the case. Essentially, it was just absolutely appalling, and the fact it was sort of branded that entertaining football, and how much at times we did get that, at times still it was just eye-bleeding stuff, and just ended up with 18 shots, but 2 of them have hit the target, and we've conceded from the 1 shot we've let go on target. So that's about how it went for the most of the season. It was just, I'm so glad it's over. And talking about it's been a task, but there's been some reasons to be positive that we've covered as well.
And Richard, was the biggest problem then kind of that consistency? You look at as I said, 4 unbeaten to start, followed up with 5 straight defeats, with a 1 week in October, the nice free-flowing football against St Mirren in December. There was just we never followed up one performance with another.
No, I was having a quick look back there, because the start of December was okay as well, wasn't it? So I remember that St Mirren game very well. There was a win against Livingston, win against St Johnstone, and albeit that was fortuitous in the extreme. It was really from the turn of the year that it really nosedived again. And I mean, the problem with it wasn't just us, and this is what makes it all the more frustrating. It was Hibs were on a horrendous run at that point. Motherwell were on a horrendous run at that point. It's just a horrible league campaign. I mean, you can all the way 2004? Would it be the last? Yeah, when we finished in 11th. So it kind of says it all. The away form was awful. And I've got so much respect for all the guys and girls who were going every away game. The numbers must have begun to drop a little bit, I would think. But it must have been soul destroying watching us away from home this season, even more than at Tawdry. So, it's just there is no defence you can put up for, and we quite literally had no.
I was going to say, very ironic.
No defence for what was a shocking league campaign.
So I think it's fair to say it's F's all round for the league campaign.
Yeah, basically. There's nothing else to add, is there?
No. So moving on then, the final segment, we'll try and kind of generate a bit of positivity and look towards the ambitions for next season. Richard, that Jim Goodwin's kind of been out in the press saying, we should be looking to finish third next season. He wants to kind of build a squad that will get us there. As much as obviously as fans, we're delighted to read that. Based on what we've seen this season, is that almost being overambitious? Should we be almost reining in our hopes for next season? Is it just a simple case of looking at an extended cup run and getting into the top 6 would be a start?
I don't think there's anything wrong with pitching your ambition at third, but it will be absolutely dependent on what kind of summer he has. Because Hearts, their recruitment last year was outstanding. When you look at the players they've got, Gary Mackay-Steven, I think it's flattered to deceive a bit, but most of the rest of the players they've brought in have made a real impact. They've got guaranteed money, big money in relative terms coming in. They've got the European football through until at least Christmas. So you can be assured that they will be investing. And if they have a similar success rate this summer, in terms of the recruitment, I think they're probably too far ahead of us to pull back in, unless we
Europe catches up with them, maybe.
Well, possibly. But I was going through the squad earlier, and I was thinking, who's going and what can they offer? I reckon we need 10 or 11 quality players in that squad. And I'm really not sure how many of the starting lineup from this season. I think more than we would probably want, will still be in the starting 11. But I'm struggling to see how, if we were still left with a rump of that squad, not a chance of in any way putting a dent in the advantage Hearts have over us right now. So it's completely dependent on Jim having a spectacular summer in the transfer market.
I suppose, Calum, 10 players, Richard's, identifying, I think Jim Goodwin was saying, 5 or 6 is the quality he's kind of seeing. Do you think we might see a bit of reliance on some of the youth players? Obviously, we saw what the impact Connor Barron had when he came back from Kelty. There's been talk around Ryan Duncan after his loan spell at Peterhead. Obviously, we saw some of the young guys, Dylan Lobban and Liam Harvey, being in the squad for the last couple of games of the season. Do you think we'll maybe have 5 or 6 signings, and then we will have youth players being integrated? And then the one player that kind of stuck out to me, I don't know if it did to you, Richard, when you were going through the squad list, is Matty Kennedy. I'm waiting for he'll be like a new signing phrase to be dished out around him. Obviously, a player Jim Goodwin's a big fan of, and he hasn't been able to utilise him so far, but I can certainly see that phrase getting banded out.
Yeah, look, there's something there with Matty Kennedy, because we've seen it in the past, but it's a long time since we've seen it. And he's another one who has real issues getting fit, staying fit, and making a consistent contribution. I'll be honest, the various names I was writing down and the thoughts I was having earlier, Matty Kennedy didn't even enter my thinking. I don't mean that to be disrespectful. It's just a reflection of what the contribution he's made so far. Yeah. Or made relatively recently in an Aberdeen squad.
I think you could probably say that for quite a few of this squad. But Calum, would you be against, that idea of integrating some of those youth players into the squad? If, again, I think we kind of touched on it last season, and certainly at the start when, Stephen brought in the likes of Calvin Ramsey, Jack McKenzie. If he said, look, this is the 5 or 6 that we're bringing in from outside, but we want to develop some of these youth players, would you be against that?
I still think 1 or 2 more might be required in addition to that 5 or 6. But in terms of integrating some of them, you look at Ryan Duncan especially, and in Glen, I think that's 2 that really stick out in my head, that have had good loan spells at a relatively decent level, similar to what Connor Barron just had. Those are 2 players that I would certainly be happy with being integrated into the squad and getting good first team minutes. In terms of like Liam Harvey, Evan Towler, Dylan Lobbin, I think it's maybe a little bit too early just now, especially given the massive improvements that we do require. But I think there will be 2 or 3 that do hang around and will start to get some minutes, and certainly within Gwen, anyway. And that left back spot's up for grabs. Okay, McKenzie's been decent at times, but not set the world light. He has his fitness troubles too. It's there to go and get for Kieran Gwen after a decent season at Kelty. Ryan Duncan, we've lacked creative sparks going forward. A perfect chance for him as well. And I think the Betfred Cup group stages could be good times to see those players in an Aberdeen shirt playing around some of the Aberdeen players that will be there for the season. And then if maybe it's a little bit too soon, there's still time to then go and improve and bring in a couple more, maybe first team players that are more experienced. But it'll be very, very interesting, and I'm very, very excited. As Richard mentioned, once we start seeing those names being linked, I'm sort of eagerly waiting that. But it needs the Jim Goodwin seal of approval, in my opinion. We saw the type of player he was. I don't think he'll sign anyone. He won't settle for less, essentially. So I look forward to that very much. So
I think it'll depend on how successful he is with his targets in the transfer market as to how many of these kids we see. Because I think probably most of the names you've mentioned there would be more likely to benefit from half a season playing Championship, top of League One, and actually getting more games on that. Because the guys I speak to who are in the game, that's what they say constantly. You're much better getting these kids out playing and actually getting minutes on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think we've seen obviously the benefit that Connor Barron's had this season, having benefited from his loan spell at Kelty. But Richard, for you as well, obviously the league season this season was really disappointing, as you said, just narrowly avoiding that Championship playoff place. If we were to, struggle in the league again next season, how important is it that we perform a lot better in the cup competitions, give the fans something else to look forward to? Obviously, there's no European football this season. The opportunity to win silverware is something we as fans crave, fans of any club crave. And as you said, that Scottish Cup record continues to go on. That's certainly something that we've got to look to improve on this season coming.
Totally. Because we love a cup run. All of us football fans do. And we're long past the days where we could have any thoughts about actually winning the league. So definitely. And like you try to put a bit as a fan, don't you? You try to put a wee bit of a positive spin on, and as the new season approaches, and even some of my pals I've spoken to say, I'm looking forward to the group stages of the League Cup. Well, maybe get to some grounds we haven't been to for a wee while. A chance to. You would hope we've got more chance of winning a few games in the group stages of the League Cup than perhaps in Europe. So, look, momentum is everything. Get new players and win a few games in the League Cup. You never know.
I suppose, Calum, it's also important that we get those players in before the group stage begins, so that the players are embedded and we can start seeing kind of the style that Jim Goodwin wants to play as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's all very, very well and good, being patient, waiting for the right target, etc. But you do need them in with a decent amount of time to bed them in, to get them used to the style of not only playing but training that Jim Goodwin will be expecting. So ideally, we will get them in. We'd like them all in before the group stages. I can't see that being the case, but we can, start to see the shape of the squad coming together before that, and also not only that, in terms of shifting season tickets before the league season starts as well, if we do look actually half decent for once in a group stages of a competition, then you never know. But I certainly am buying into the League Cup group stages. Just excited to be in the group stages of a competition, summer football, and hopefully with some new players that actually show that they want to care, that they want to play for the club and they actually care. That would be nice too. That's my main thing, to be honest.
See, this has been like therapy for you.
I know.
We started off doom and gloom and feeling desperate, and we've just eased you through the season. We've got rid of it all now. And look at you. You're bouncing now, full of hope and optimism.
And it was also just reminded me that I actually still need to go and renew my season ticket. We'll see if anyone else has enjoyed that same sort of feeling towards the end of the episode and is now suddenly renewed. But yeah, I'm also, as kind of Richard said, like some of his friends are looking forward to the group stages. So am I. I'm kind of hoping we get Stranraer away at the weekend. That would be a nice ground to tick off a good long trip. Rather that than a Wednesday night anyway. But obviously this season, I think it's quite resounding. It certainly looks like it's an F for a resounding failure, but we can but hope next season brings relative success. And I think anything compared to this season will be seen as a success, because God hoping it can't get much worse. But Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you on, get your insight as someone respected in the game in Scottish football. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, pleasure. No, absolute pleasure. Loved it.
And also, I suppose, from myself and Calum, just a thanks for taking the time and given, what you've given to Scottish football. Obviously, you've taken the decision to leave the BBC after 30 years service. Saturdays won't be the same. Hearing your tones and telling us the scores from around the ground. And, I think I certainly speak for myself and a few other fans, it'll be a miss not having you on the radio, someone that is impartial to that West Coast media. I can say that, you can't. And yeah, it will be a miss. And, for someone that has dedicated their life to Scottish football, to dedicate myself and Calum a bit of time. I know obviously we're going to have the episode with you out next week as well, the 5-a-side episode. So it's not the first time you've given up your time to speak to us. So just want to say a big thanks to you for giving up your time to join us on Red Tinted Glasses, but also for what you've done for Scottish football as well.
I really appreciate it, guys. It wasn't an easy decision, but I just figured that 30 full seasons was probably a nice round number. And I'll still be doing Sundays and midweeks. It'll be very strange when the new season kicks off, not to be either sitting in the studio or out at a ground. But I'm looking forward to carrying on with doing bits and pieces with the BBC and to doing the work with Cove Rangers as well, which is really exciting. And also, because I'm moving home, hopefully getting the opportunity to get along to Pittodrie as a fan again, which I've not done I have occasionally, but essentially I haven't done in 35 years, I suppose, since I entered the broadcasting business. So yeah, gosh, I'm almost getting excited about next season as well. What have you done to me?
See, it rubs off Calum's optimism. Honestly, it does strange things to people. But yeah, all the best with with Cove Rangers as well. And you never know, that could be a derby, maybe in the cup, or never knows, in the league in a few years to come. Hopefully, a few years on that. Well, from an Aberdeen perspective, I know from a Cove perspective, you'll be hoping maybe sooner rather than later. But yeah, thanks again, Richard.
No worries.
And thanks again to Richard Gordon and Calum. Also, thanks to you for joining me on the episode. And I suppose we should also thank the rest of the co-hosts and guests that we've had on this season, to everybody that's contributed to Red Tinted Glasses. And obviously, of course, you at home, whether you've been watching or listening. But nice to end with speaking to someone like Richard, and especially the season and service, as I said there, he's given to Scottish football.
Absolutely. It was fantastic. Talking to Richard doesn't really feel like you're talking to someone from the media, despite the fact he's been, so involved in it for 30 plus years. It does sort of feel like it's just another fan's perspective, but also he has the added bonus of that experience and contacts and knowing some certain information as well. So absolutely fantastic. Thank you once again to Richard for joining us, and all the best in the new venture with Cove Rangers too. Hope it goes well. Not too well that they come up to the Premiership and beat us, but
Yeah, or beat us in the cup, as we meant. And if you have enjoyed Richard on this episode, as we said, you can hear from him again next week, where, said obviously with it being the end of the season, we've got that bit of lull in content. We will have our reaction to the Premier Sports Cup draw, which is being taking place on Wednesday, the 25th of May. So our reaction to that cup draw and who we are facing, alongside a little segment with Richard Gordon looking at the last 20 years, picking a five-a-side team from Great Britain and Ireland and pipping them against a rest of the world five-a-side team, all based on Aberdeen the last 20 years. Come along, let's see, remember some of the players that you may have forgotten about, because trust me, when it comes to the rest of the world team, we were having to scrape the barrel at times.
Absolutely. I'm sure there was even players that we missed out and Richard missed out. So I'm sure people will let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe for that episode as well. There's much, much more coming, and hopefully a very, very busy transfer window. Follow wherever you're listening in, and follow us on Twitter at RTG_podcast, on Instagram at RTG.podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in again. We hope you did enjoy the episode, and we'll see you very, very shortly.